Well, good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Nice. Thanks for the thumbs up. So nice to see you discussing the vision statement. I really appreciate all the thoughtful considerations that you're putting into those words. Every single word really makes a difference. And, future generations of people in Burnaby are going to be thinking about what you were thinking about when you set out that vision for the future. So, hi again. My name's Erin. I've been asked today, I'm sorry? Did I? Oh, okay, hi. I've been asked today to speak about growth and density, which I am delighted to do. I speak about these things quite a lot. And specifically, I've been asked to speak about strategies for shaping growth, the recent provincial legislative changes around urban planning, some tools for financing growth, policy direction highlights, and just to give you a little bit of a sneak preview into some of the work that we've been doing on the Burnaby 2050 team around policy and around growth scenarios. So you have a sense of what's coming for the engagement later this spring. So, we've talked about this before. We are a growing city. We're projected to continue growing. This is a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to start a business. We know there's going to be lots more people living here by the year 2050. Many new jobs are going to be created and many new homes are going to be built. And one of our main jobs as long-range planners, and your job today, is to think about how can we shape that growth so that it lays on the land in a way that supports us in achieving those vision statements that we have, those ideas around livability and prosperity and equity and sustainability and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be talking about 4 key strategies for shaping growth that urban planners use. And as I'm describing them, I want you to think about places that you might have visited or parts of this city or this region where they're really drawing on these different strategies. The first one is called concentric growth. So this is focusing all of your growth, all of your activity, all your new jobs, all your new homes in your downtown, and leaving the rest of the city pretty much as single detached homes. This has a lot of advantages. It means there's minimal change and disruption outside of downtown. It makes it really, really simple. All the buses and transit service is sort of oriented around going downtown and then leaving downtown. But it has some disadvantages. And one of those things is that if you can imagine, if everybody is going to the same place in the morning and then leaving that place in the afternoon, you have a rush hour traffic effect. And that happens on the roads, and it also makes it really difficult to serve efficiently if you are a transit operator, because you're driving full buses in the morning into downtown and then empty buses back to the neighborhood to go pick up the next wave of folks. And when you're driving empty buses, you're losing money, and that makes for a really inefficient transit system. Also makes for a really limited experience if you're out in the neighborhoods. Limited services, limited amenities, limited activity, not a lot of transit. There's just not a lot going on outside of downtown. So excuse me. Here we go. What many cities have done, and what Burnaby has been sort of on the forefront of many cities, is called a polycentric growth strategy. So this is where you choose a handful of growth nodes, or what we call in Burnaby town centers, and you focus your growth and activity in those places. So this supports more local access to jobs and services and amenities and multi-unit housing. It makes it much easier to serve with transit because you can just connect your nodes, and then there's always people going back and forth all day long. It's a lot more efficient. It's easier to plan for services, and it helps to direct growth towards the places you want it and avoid having growth in places where you don't want it, like environmentally sensitive places. But it has some disadvantages, and we've heard a lot about this through the Burnaby 2050 process. It means there's not a lot of missing middle multifamily housing options outside the town centers, and it creates, in a rapidly growing place like Burnaby, a stark contrast between the growth that happens in a town center and the growth happening right outside. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. So I'm going to talk about our next strategy, which is corridor-oriented growth. So this is where you're focusing your growth along a corridor that has high-quality transit. So think about a corridor like Kingsway, for example, that's had high-frequency transit for a long time, and you're clustering your growth in a line along that transit route. This is very supportive of high quality transit because there's always people getting on and off the bus or on and off the transit service. You are able to reinvest and improve the frequency on that transit route. And it enables the efficient provision of other kinds of infrastructure that's more efficient when everything's all in a nice straight line. So think about if you're a postal worker or if you are putting in a new sewer line, much more efficient if everything's all lined up. But it has some disadvantages. One of those is that it's difficult to assemble properties all along a line in order to build a new apartment complex or whatnot. And it can have the negative consequence of focusing more people close to roadways where they might be exposed to higher concentrations of pollution and noise and other kinds of traffic related externalities. And then finally, we have the distributed growth strategy. So this is where you don't really try to cluster your growth in any particular way. You let it happen wherever it wants to go. And this has many advantages. Many cities use this strategy. It supports renewal and housing choice all across the city. Jobs can happen anywhere. Services can happen anywhere. And because you're spreading that growth more across a larger geography, overall the densities can be a little bit lower. However, it's really hard to serve with transit because the transit service is trying to serve everybody, but because nobody is clustered into particular places, you don't get that frequency and the higher quality service, and you end up having pretty low ridership. Same with other kinds of infrastructure. It's very inefficient for the taxpayer, and it might actually allow or encourage growth in places where you don't want it, environmentally insensitive places and hazardous locations. So in reality, what most cities do and what Burnaby is probably going to end up doing is taking a balanced growth approach where we're drawing on what works, what we like about all of these 4 different strategies, and trying to mitigate for the disadvantages that we want to avoid. Now, many people ask me when I talk about growth, what if we just had a no growth strategy? Can't we just stop growing altogether? And some municipalities do attempt to stop growing. They slow down their development applications. They stop allowing for new development to take place in their community. And what tends to happen is that the housing stock gets outdated, it gets overcrowded, it becomes more expensive. Businesses have trouble recruiting and retaining workers because there's no place for the workers to live. And people find they can't stay in the community as they age and move through their stages of life. They have to leave the community to find appropriate housing. And then in some extreme cases, because your population isn't growing, you're not getting young families, you have to consolidate and sometimes even close services. And you've probably heard about communities in this region that have had to close schools, for example, because they've chosen a no-growth strategy. So the province knows that British Columbia is growing, and they have introduced a couple of new tools for municipalities to accommodate growth as well, and I want to speak about those right now. So the first one is called small-scale multi-unit housing. This is new legislation that came to British Columbia in the fall of 2023. And basically what this does is it makes it impossible for a municipality, an urban municipality, to have a single detached housing zone in an urban area. So what this will mean for Burnaby is that in all areas that are currently zoned for single or 2 family, we will now be allowing secondary suites and accessory dwelling units like laneway homes. We must also allow up to 3 or 4 units per lot, depending on the lot size, and in places that are close to a frequent transit network, up to 6 units on a lot. So the objective here is to get more gentle density, more housing options for people, and make it happen faster. And so the hope that the province has is that we're going to see more multiplexes, more basement suites, more options for people for housing all across the province. The second change to the legislation is what they've called transit-oriented development areas, and this is something that Burnaby has done for a really long time, so it won't be too much of a change. But basically, they've drawn big 800-meter circles around every SkyTrain and 400-meter circles around every bus exchange, and they've said there is a certain number of minimum stories or minimum density that you must allow as a municipality within proximity to those SkyTrains and bus exchanges. So the closer you are to the transit service, the higher the minimum height or minimum density. In the case of Burnaby, we have lots of SkyTrain stations, so I've listed a few of the stations that are impacted here. And it also impacts us if there are stations or exchanges outside the city of Burnaby, but that circle falls into Burnaby's land area. So an example of that is Burquitlam. So that's it in a nutshell. Something that people also ask me quite a lot about when I talk about growth and density, is who's going to pay for it? All of these new people, all of these new workers, they're going to put pressure on the roads. They're going to make the parks too crowded in the pool. I won't be able to get swimming lessons, and it's going to create costs for the city, and who pays? So we have tools. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail, but basically tools that allow the city to charge the developer or the builder a certain amount of money for every additional unit they're building that goes into city revenues so that the city can pay to accommodate that growth. So it can go to everything from widening the sewer pipes, improving the roads, building new parks, and making sure that all of those services that you rely on to have a livable experience in Burnaby are there when you move to this city. So we have to follow two key principles when we're putting these charges in place. The first is we can't charge so much money that it's no longer possible for a developer to build the new growth. And the other principle is that the growth is supposed to pay for the growth. So it should be proportionate to the amount that we expect that new growth to use for every single service. So we have a number of different tools, not going to go into a lot of detail here, but basically we have development cost charges that we can use. For a long time, the city of Burnaby has used something called a community benefit bonus policy. That's a made in Burnaby, tool that was used to, and that has been used to collect monies for additional density in town centers, and that has gone into a fund that has paid for amenities. And then the province has just created a new tool that cities can use called amenity cost charges. So that similarly will allow cities to collect monies to pay for things like childcare, community centers, playgrounds, etc. Okay, so we have been working really hard on the Burnaby 2050 team to develop some draft policy language, to develop some growth scenarios, and as you've seen, the vision, values, and guiding principles. And we're really excited to bring this out to the community in the spring, starting in mid-April. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but the organizers have just asked me to give you a quick highlight, and I think they can share these slides later. I won't be able to get to every single one. So on the policy front, we've developed what we're calling policy directions. These are not the actual policies that will be in Burnaby 2050. They're a much more concept level statement about where we're thinking we're going when it comes to all the different policy topics. And more detailed policy language will be drafted based on those policy directions later in the process. But now is a great time to check in with the community and say, This is the direction we want to go on transportation. Do you agree? This is the direction we want to go on agriculture. Do you agree? And so on. So the other thing I wanted to mention here is we have filtered every single policy direction through our 3 strategic lenses to make sure that all the policies in Burnaby 2050 are advancing reconciliation, are advancing climate action, and are advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we're really proud to be able to say that we've done that. So I'm going to flip through this, apologies, really quickly, but here are just some highlights of the policy directions that we'll be proposing this spring. And I've clustered them around the 5 topic areas that you have for your program: climate change, housing choices, and transportation. So as I said, coming up in future sessions, we'll be sharing our policy guide that will contain all of the policy directions. It'll also have links to our survey where people can provide feedback. We'd love to get feedback from this group on any of the policy directions that interest you. We've structured it so that you don't have to engage on topics that you don't care about. If you don't care about transportation, focus on something else. The other thing that we have done is we have developed 2 growth scenarios, and when you see those growth scenario maps, I want you to be thinking about those 4 shaping growth strategies that I talked about, and how we've pulled on the different strategies to build some scenarios that make a lot of sense for the future of Burnaby. So we'll be asking people, which of these scenarios do you prefer? What parts of each scenario do you like? And what are you concerned about? And we'll use that information to develop our final land use map for Burnaby 2050. So our public engagement campaign starts April 16th. It finishes on June 9th. I think your group will get some of that information early so you can start working on it a little bit early. But I'm going to end my presentation here and open the floor up for any questions if there are any.
All right. I saw a number of questions. Here, do we have 2 mics? We can run to different ends of the room. Where's the second mic? Perfect. Okay, who hasn't had a chance to make a comment or ask a question today? Let's start there. Anybody? Anybody not had a chance to speak today who wants to speak? All right, we'll open up to repeat flyers then. Okay, start here.
Well, I have 2, but I'll just start with the 1. On your slide relating to growth paying for growth, is it possible to also acknowledge that that growth also has the sustainable nature that it can pay for its own maintenance as well, so that you're not doing like growth to pay for, current maintenance requirements?
Great question. Okay. Kira in social planning is going to talk a little bit about some strategies for doing that. So you can do things like you could set up an operation fund, for example, for your new childcare. However, for the most part, in general, in municipalities in British Columbia, maintenance, ongoing operations, that's paid for by property taxes through the city's annual budget. So we have a different kind of revenue stream that pays for things like maintenance.
Yeah, so like as a follow-up of that, like a projection where the growth that you're going into has a projection of how much revenue you'll be, accruing from like property taxes, whatever, to pay for the infrastructure maintenance that will be required for the future. That's kind of like the overall concept of that.
That sounds like a really good idea. I don't know enough about municipal finance to be able to speak to whether that happens.
And sorry, just one other like quick comment. The slide that you have like for the 3 different strategic lenses, I'm just curious about is like economic considerations also something that, like, where does that fit within a strategy there?
Yeah, economic considerations are indeed very important, and we're working really closely with the Burnaby Board of Trade, who I think has come and spoken to this group to make sure that we're aligned with their economic vision for the city. It's not one of our key strategic lenses for Burnaby 2050, but it's certainly a consideration.
All right, we've got a question over there.
Thank you. Just a question around looking at like growth projections. You mentioned 2 maps that'll be interesting to see, but from what we heard previously, the numbers are extremely concerning, and they assume our status quo is healthy for housing. 55,000 new units, 100,000 new people, 1.8 people per new house. That assumes and goes with the baseline that our current housing market is good and what we want to keep. That's fundamentally broken and setting us up for failure. And so my question is, how do we take that into account? Because at this point, from everything that I've heard sitting here so far, it seems like the idea is we want to keep what we have, even though it's a disaster and it's not working. And so how do we get more housing? Do we even know how much more housing we need to get to the point where we're not continually making it worse like we are today? And then how do we allow for that new growth to happen while building more so we can both grow at the same time as well as making housing more affordable for everybody else that's here already?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thanks for raising that. When I say 55,000 new housing units, that doesn't tell you a lot about the quality of the need that we have in Burnaby. So we do have data that tells us what we need in terms of affordability, what we need in terms of rental, what we need in terms of supportive housing for people with special needs. Lots of different kinds of housing in the housing spectrum, and those needs are not being met necessarily right now. And so we have a document called our Housing Needs Report that we must update every 5 years, and that goes into great detail about where we're doing well on different kinds of housing and where we've got a shortfall. We're aware of those shortfalls, and we're working to build in new policies into Burnaby 2050 to make sure that not only are we building enough housing, but we're building the right kind of housing. It is a lot harder to do than it is to say, and it's going to continue. It's going to take a lot of partnership work with other levels of government that need to be at the table in order to make those types of housing possible. But thanks for raising that important point.
Other questions? Are there one or two more questions for Aaron? Okay.
Could you elaborate on the specific type of partnership work that you generally do with other levels of government?
Yeah, sure. I can give a few examples. So on the housing file, municipalities almost always need to partner with the provincial government and the federal government, and sometimes even with a local host nation, in order to make an affordable or a non-market housing project happen. So often the financing will come from BC Housing, and you can get some grants from the federal government, and you can bring that together with some land provided by the city, or the city will do things like accelerate the development process. And in that way, all levels of government are contributing to creating those projects. And if you walk by a new affordable housing project, you'll probably see a billboard that says all the different levels of government and agencies that have had to come together to make those projects possible. And that's often part of the reason why they tend to take a little bit longer, take a little bit more work, because you've got to bring all these different organizations to the table, get them to agree, get them to contribute. But at the end of the day, it makes for a better project overall, because everybody has contributed and made sure that different perspectives are being heard.
Any final burning questions?
My curiosity is you are planning. Do you all work with the finance department to do the budgeting to see if I plan this, what kind of funding we need and all that? It got to be a teamwork, not just one department working on planning and all that, because you need to know what kind of budget you need and make allowance for it. So I see that you all strategize it, but financing is another part of it. So do you all come together and discuss it and see how it will work in the overall scheme?
Yeah, what a great question. And that's a question all about the importance of teamwork, right?
Yes.
We have to work together with people who have different skills, so that our plans make sense from a lot of different perspectives. So actually, I have been working quite a lot with our finance department because we're working to implement this new amenity cost charge program in the city of Burnaby. And so they've been really interested in the work that we're doing on Burnaby 2050 because they want to hear about the future. And we're interested in the work that they're doing because they're thinking about the numbers and the dollars and cents and making sure that it all pencils out properly. Yeah, great question.
One thing that I'll mention, Bernie question, okay, because we're behind time, so I just want to, okay, let's do a really quick one, and then we're going to move on.
Hi, my name's Kathy. Just looking at the housing needs report, it's current to January 2021. Is there going to be a more current one released? Or are you basing research from that one?
The work is underway right now to update that housing needs report. One of the exciting new changes from the provincial legislation this fall is that we're now required to update our housing needs report every 5 years. The province wants every city to have fresh data every 5 years so that you're planning based on the best data available. So yeah, it's coming soon.
Let's first thank Erin, because that was a lot of really important information.